Thank you. Thanks to all of you to be here to listen to someone who talks about game development or video games in general. Most people don't believe much in this industry, while it's the biggest industry, entertainment, and that's a statement. So what I'm going to talk to you about today. So first, sorry, I have no presentation. I thought it was going to be some kind of a panel where I'm sitting down and there is no presentation. Turns out I'm standing up and there is a presentation. I was kind of, it's my fault. I didn't ask, it's my fault. So I'll try to make up for it with some, no, I don't even have that. But I'll try to make up for it somehow. So first of all, I'm a game developer. My name is Mohammed, mostly known as Spoot, which is my gamer tag. All gamers are mostly known by their gamer tags than their actual names. I might go by Spoot except for my both parents, Mohammed, but for everybody else, I'm Spoot. I've been a gamer all my life, and mainly I am a game developer, video game developer. But I do a lot of other things in the gaming industry, since the very big industry, as I told you, it's the biggest industry in entertainment. So there is a lot of opportunity to work. I also commentate esports games. I'm a gaming journalist. I've been on my fair share of shows on radios, on TVs, on digital shows, on YouTube and whatnot. I do a lot of gaming, and especially I'm a video game collector ever since the very early 90s. I built a big collection of video games over time. And that's gonna be recurring in this speech because it's very important. It's something that actually affected my whole life. But what I'm going to be specifically talking about today is game development, the hat of game developer. Because as you know already from the title of this speech, as a game developer, I had to work as a doctor, as an advertiser, as a teacher, and we'll get into it later. Not so much later. So first thing, when you think of a video game, what's the first thing you think of? Probably something like save the princess, kill the terrorists, save the hostages, I don't know, save the world, be a hero, something entertaining. Or maybe something competitive like esports, Counter-Strike, Valorant, I don't know, League of Legends. You think either esports or something entertaining. Well, no, there is also a big category of games, especially with gamification, that is called serious games. So what are serious games? It's a category, not a genre of games. It could be of any genre. A serious game could be a first-person shooter, could be a strategy game, but a serious game is a game that treats a serious thematic. Not serious game as in this game is serious, damn, it's serious. No, it's serious because it's closer to real life. Like it's a game, it could be a healthcare game, medical game, educational, and I'm gonna give you examples. And I had the luck to work on nearly every one of them. Especially as someone who lives in a third world country where a lot of these games are outsourced because of cost efficiency and whatnot. So here it's really better to work with the Tunisians, for example, because, it's cost efficiency. I'll leave it to that. So I worked with a lot of these serious games. So serious games are basically not the kind of games we grew up with. We grew up with Mario, Sonic, platformers, fast game, entertaining game. But I think it's important to say where I started. Where I started being passionate about gaming and thinking this is what I should be doing later on. It goes back to '93. I was literally 3 years old, back to Germany. I'm from German descendants, so we were visiting family. And my grandfather and both his daughters, my mother and my aunt, they bought a Super Nintendo. Some people know the Super Nintendo here? Good, okay, some classic lovers. So the game they bought with was Mario Paint. That was the first game I ever played. And since that moment decided my whole life. I think they bought the Super Nintendo, they brought it to the hotel. We tested the console. We came back here to Tunis. We bought all the games you would know, like the Zelda, the Mario, the Metroid, and I fell in love. I kept following the evolution of gaming throughout history, like till today. Then we had the big pivotal point when we went to 3D, like in the mid-90s. Back then, a generational leap was something amazing. Like you go from the Super Nintendo to the Nintendo 64, you go from 2D to 3D, you go from sprites to polygons. It was big, it was huge. Today, if you go from PS4 to PS5, like you have from 60 FPS to from full HD to 4K, it's not you don't feel a generational leap. Back then, it was something big. So I was always very curious to know what's gonna happen next gen, what's new, which made me a collector by extension. So every time I buy the new console, I try to buy the older generation because the older generation gets cheaper. So I built up a collection over time. And especially when I became a teenager, I really loved video games and I thought I should be working on this industry. And the first thing you would think of, especially back then, what can I do as someone who wants to work in the industry of gaming? Unlike today, where you could think, I want to be an esports commentator, I want to have an esports team, I want to become, I don't know, a 3D artist and I design characters. Back then you would think directly game developer. So I oriented all my life to become a game developer. Even in my bachelor degree, I chose the specialty of becoming a computer scientist. So everything, every decision I took was pointing out to becoming a game developer. Later on, I became a student. And as a student who wants to maintain a video game collection, I needed an income source. I had no income, I was a student. So I was trying to find some gigs or as a freelancer, some jobs to make games. This is where I learned about serious games. So the first game, the first client was a soda who wanted to advertise their soda. And they tasked me not only to develop a game, or not only developing the game and writing the code, I had to design the whole thing, even come up with the idea. So back then I was kind of showing off. I had the SDK for somebody knows the Kinect from the Xbox 360, the camera? Back then it was new. The Kinect from the Xbox 360, you could move in front of your TV in the living room and stuff. So I made a game where it's a bowling game, where the pins are bottles of that soda, and the ball is an orange. It was an orange-based flavor soda. I don't want to name it, but it was a soda. So they liked it. I got the job, I got the money. So this is where I learned about advert games. And I knew that video games aren't only meant to be fun. It is kind of, I hope it was fun. It was my game. But the main purpose wasn't to make people buy the game, but buy the soda. So it was an advert game, a serious game, even though it was a video game. I remember getting my pay, and the first thing I bought was the money I got some Nokia Engage games. Somebody knows the Nokia Engage? It was the oldest gaming phone. Like it wasn't really good, but it was something collectible. I bought a set of sealed games. I still have them somewhere at home. I won't tell you where, but they are very well hidden. Today they're worth a lot. When I got them, they weren't worth as much. The thing is, the good thing I did is I knew that everything is going to be tenfold more expensive later on down the line. That's why I always try to buy things when they're still new, because later on they'll become collectible and rare, and so you have to buy things sometimes at a certain window of time. Later on, it's gone. It's going to become something very, very expensive to get. So after working on that advert game, I loved it. I loved how I was still a student and making money to maintain my collection. I was still looking for other people who want a freelancer game developer to make games for them. And I was only finding things on serious games. And that time I found that company called NextGen Corp. They were looking for a game developer to make a game dedicated specifically to autistic children. I knew nothing about that beforehand. So the game was, obviously, I had a psychiatrist and ergotherapist with me to tell me what to do, because I'm not myself a doctor. The game was, because as far as I knew back then, autistic children don't communicate the way we do. If I'm hungry, I'll tell you I'm hungry. You would know, you'd give me food. Simple. But autistic children don't operate that way. They don't feel something, they will feel that way. No. So the game had some choices you would make, button you would press, decisions to make. The way the child interacted with the tablet was on Android tablets. The parent would see, and according to the outcome of the gameplay of the child, he would know if his child is sleepy, hungry, wants to go to the toilet, wants to go for a walk. And that's all psychology with psychologists. So that was the second thing I worked on. It was a medical game for mental health for autistic children, and that was still video game development. When I started the career, let's say humble career of video game developer, I never expected to work on advertising and then medical. And afterwards, I found another gig, which was with a company who sells books for children to teach them how to read and write in Arabic and stuff. And then again, I had to be a teacher because I had to come up with a game, the whole concept, where the child could learn how to read, how to write the letters, with obviously pictures and stuff. And I had to be somewhat a teacher to make that game happen. And it worked. It sold back then, like it's more than a decade ago, obviously. But as a freelancer, I worked on 3 different projects as a game developer, but the games in and of themselves have pretty much nothing to do with gaming. And funny enough, after I was no more a student, I graduated. The first job I got was a full-time job as a game developer. It was here in Sidi Bou Said. It was a startup called Quink. The client, our client, was in Switzerland. And what was the client? Who you would think would ask, outsource in Tunisia, developers to develop video games? It was a hospital, again, in medical. That was a full-time job, not a gig, not a freelancer. So what does a hospital want from game developers? This time around, it's more into physical injuries more than mental, like autism and stuff. But it was for the patients of the hospital. Maybe they need a rehab. Maybe some patient had an injury in the knee or on the shoulder. But if the doctor goes to the patient and tells them, do this movement, like it's not going to happen, he's blocked. He couldn't do it. He has an injury, he needs a rehab. But if I put him in front of a video game, where obviously we had to design the whole games from the start. Like the doctors in Switzerland only tells us we need a game where the patient has to do this movement. I even made VR games where he has to rehab the neck. Maybe they had some neck injuries somehow. So I even developed a VR game where he puts the headset and he has to point at some directions, aiming and shooting. So he could move his neck. Because if you put the patient in a context of a video game, he might do it subconsciously. It's not like you go tell him, move your neck, or no, it's not going to work that way. But in a video game context, that would work better. So I worked for maybe a couple of years in that company until Indians, turns out they're more cost efficient than Tunisians. So they moved the whole project to India. But yeah, it was sad, kind of sad, but it just happened. So later on, I decided, no, this time around, I gotta make a game where you shoot people. So I worked on a game, and another startup was in the Marsa called Nuke Cockroach. The game was Veterans Online. It's on Steam. You can look it up. If you type Veterans Online on Google, you will probably find some gameplay footage still remaining on YouTube or something. It was a top-down shooter with 5 versus 5 online game called Veteran Online, so obviously it's online. It was fun. It was fun to finally work on a game where you just have to be entertained, man. Serious games were still a big part of my path. I loved making them. And I felt like when I turned into entertaining games, it's like I don't want to say it, but downgraded. Like I used to make games for a higher purpose. Even though entertainment is a big purpose too. So that's it. And afterwards, I also worked on a game as a freelancer because after those 2 experiences, I switched back to being a freelancer. I did other things. I started a journalism career with shows everywhere and stuff. So I switched back to being a freelancer game developer. I worked on a game called Warshmallows. You can still find Warshmallows on Steam, especially on the Nintendo Switch. It's sold better on the Nintendo Switch. It's a game that's a mix between Brawlhalla, Smash Bros, Worms. It's a fun game to play with friends, especially couch gameplay, like you're all sitting in the same room. You can find it even on the Nintendo eShop on the Switch now. But then later on, I had a task to tutor, let's say, at an incubator who incubates startups who are trying to make games. So one of the startups I was tutoring, they were making a game. Their client was a factory. So what was the game? For the employees. So the factory has some security measures. As an employee, when you get in the factory, you have some procedures to do. You don't just get in and start working. You have to put gloves on, put your helmet on, put your boots. If you're gonna lift something heavy, you don't bend your back, you bend your knees. All of that in VR. I had to tutor them to tell them how to do it either technically or give them some ideas. You know, VR gives motion sickness, so sometimes the employees wouldn't want to do the training, the VR training before getting to work because it gives dizziness. Let's all agree, especially when you're moving and not moving. You know, you have the VR headset. You're pushing forward. You're moving when your feet aren't actually moving. So I had to come up with ideas to circumvent all of these problems. Like for this issue, for example, I told them to make the game where the employee just has to put his gloves when he's sitting in this same position, and then maybe just turn, not move, just turn, put the helmet on, and when he has to go to the other section of the game, the whole game switches to the surveillance camera, and he sees himself in the third person, like he sees from the camera perspective, like he moved, without actually having to move yourself, to avoid any motion sickness that could be caused to the player or the employee. So that was something, that was a serious game for a factory. So as I told you, as a game developer, I would have never thought that I would have to work with employees in a factory, with doctors, with teachers. So, and when you think of it today in the video game industry in general, game development industry, mind you, you would eventually work with very, very different kind of people, because in the process of making a game, or let's say a pretty much big enough game, you would have to work with almost every profile. The artists, like the sound artist, the 3D artist, the 2D artist, the UI UX designer, the voice actor, the actor, because like in the animations you see in video games, these are actual people who made them. How much time are you gonna spend animating with the PC? You need actual actors to make the stunts with the motion capture technology and stuff. So you have the actors, singers, even people who have literature specialty and know about history, because there is a localization process. When you move a game from, let's say we're in Japan and we make a game. If we move it to the West, we have to make sure that the game is suitable for that culture. You can't just move a game with, I'll give you an example, a very simple example. Wolfenstein is an old game. Somebody knows Wolfenstein? Good. So Wolfenstein, like the earliest ones, you had to fight the army of the mustache guy. I don't know if I can say the name, but you had to fight the army of that mustache guy. So you can't have that content in Germany. So who knows if that content has to be censored or not? Historians. So the gaming companies back then, like id Software, had to hire historians to know whether the content of your game is suitable for whatever area you're moving to or you're releasing your game into. Not only make the game in German. Okay, you have to translate the game. Obviously, if it's in Japanese or English, you move it to Germany, it has to be translated to German. But even the content, maybe you know, I don't know, probably there are Tunisians here. You know, there's the same example of localization. In Space Toon, when you watch the anime in Space Toon, and you watch the original version Japanese that's aired worldwide, the female characters are always dressed more modestly. They have to match the culture. That's localization in gaming. It's people that should know the culture everywhere in the world to make the games suitable everywhere in the world. And I worked with people that localized games. It was fun to talk to people. When I started my career as a game developer, I never thought I would meet this many different set of skills. It's insane. Really, I loved it. I even have a friend, I would even give an example, a friend of mine who doesn't live far from me, man. He's near me. He's a very good friend of mine. He loves Pokemon as much as I do. We were friends because we played both Pokemon. And he used to work in an embassy here in Tunisia as a translator. Not gonna say which embassy, don't want trouble. But then he pursued his dream. He wanted to become a localizer, like to translate stuff. He's literally now working in the Pokemon company as a localizer. He localizes games. Like he's the one responsible of you getting a French version of Pokemon. Would you believe that? He's Tunisian. His name is Usama. He's a very good friend of mine. Now he's in the States, obviously. But to tell you how much, like his profile, he was a translator as an embassy. He had nothing to do with gaming. Now he works in a gaming company of the biggest IP in the world. Pokemon is the most profitable IP in the world. It's the IP that generates the most money, with the Pokemon cards, with the games, with the plushies, with the merches, with everything. So yeah, that's to tell you how much the gaming industry is big. And when you get, as a game developer, expect to work with very different profiles, very different set of skills, you would love it, most likely. That's it. If we have questions.
Any questions? Yeah.
First of all, thank you for sharing with us your experience. I want to ask, how was your strategy to adapt in the different fields?
To adapt?
To adapt your knowledge in the different fields. How you have made the research to apply the technology into different fields?
It really depends on what project I was working on. So the advertising thing, uh, I was literally giving it a guess, man. It was a luck. I thought maybe a bowling game with the pins looking like the bottles of the soda. It was luck. Sometimes it's luck. Sometimes I was in direct contact with people that are from that field, like with doctors. I couldn't make a medical game about autism knowing nothing about autism. Like, yeah, I had to be monitored by actual doctors. That's it. Every time you have to adapt. Sometimes it's luck, sometimes it's people from that specific field. So that's it. Thank you. Any other question? You didn't hear about AI?
Artificial intelligence.
AI, you want to know my opinion about AI in game development? It would never replace developers, because, especially in game development, because it's very specific, super specific. When you make, maybe there is a lot of common stuff, generic stuff when you do websites, apps, but in video games, what you want to reach is most of the time very specific to what you want to do in your game. So a game is very different from another game. A website or an app, especially some kind of apps, are very similar. You could have AI actually help you so much, but in video games, AI could give you an idea, but it would never replace the developer, because you would want to reach some very specific things. And you know, it's object-oriented programming. You have many classes, and these classes communicate, and you would have to know every dependency from each class, if this class inherits from the other class, and so it's very complicated. So AI would be a very good tool to accelerate, to give you a small portion of the code, but yeah, good. But it won't replace you overall, because it can't do the whole thing for you. Like, you know, there's a lot of dependencies. I think you would spend more time telling the AI all the dependencies than you would actually do the code yourself.
Actually, I can show you many examples where people just generated like a whole game just by asking, like, by just prompting.
The game would do, to an extent, what you asked it for, but sometimes there are very specifics. You would still have to code them by hand. I could tell AI make a game where does you would feel it's moral to sell your game afterwards. What?
Just like build your game in the fastest way. It's a good thing. I mean, like,
Yeah, we have a lot of things with AI that's working today. My whole For You page is the tum sahur and stuff weird like that. I don't know if you find it in your For You page. I have a lot of weird stuff popping up, all of AI, and people are making money out of it. I don't know. Who am I to judge? Who am I to judge?
Okay, thank you. So